Everyone, I'm actually not going to complain about the weather today. A little bit breezy, but nothing very much. About 10 degrees, so nice working temperature, and it's not raining. It's Christmas Eve, 24th of December, and there are many things I should be doing, but I'm going to take this opportunity to do a little bit of gardening. In this video, we're going to clear this bed. It was full of half-hardy annuals that the frost has well and truly got now. I'm not going to dig them up from the roots. I'm just going to cut them all off, and then I'm going to mulch the bed ready for the winter. And what I want to talk to you about today is mulching with horse manure or horse poo. What's the difference and what are the pros and cons? Okay, so I use a vast array of mulches in my garden. But today I'm going to concentrate on talking about horse manures and horse poo. Nearly all the information you find online will be about horse manure. And I just wanted to have a chat about the differences, because it was one of the things when I started experimenting with different mulches and things that I found I couldn't quite get to grips with, because I just didn't quite understand the differences. I do also have chickens, so I have chicken manure and bedding. I use a lot of leaf litter, homemade compost from all the vegetation that's chopped down, wood bark, ash out the fire, all those sorts of things. But as I said, I think the video would be really long if we went into detail into everything. So we'll just have a talk about the manure and the horse poo. So when you go online and they're talking about horse manure, they are nearly always talking about horse manure from stabled horses. So in that you will have a lot of the brown matter, so whatever the horse is bedded on, which could be an array of things. It could be straw, it could be a miscanthus bedding, it could be a wood pellet, all make absolutely fantastic compost. It could also be some of the food they've been eating, so hay or haylage, again fantastic brown material to go into compost. But you will also have urine in there, which has quite a high ammonia content. When stabled manure is composted, because of all the extra brown material in there, it will compost really hot, which is actually really beneficial, because horses are not ruminants, so they've just got one stomach. Basically any seeds they consume, either from their pasture or from whatever forage they're fed, just go straight through. So horse manure that's not composted hot will be prone to having a lot of weeds come up in it. But generally, stabled compost, if it is piled enough, you'll see the heap steaming, compost really hot. It's brilliant material if you can get it, because it's got all of those extra things in it. It's not just the horse poo, but there is a big but coming. Lots of horses can be stabled at a stable yard, and they're owned by an array of different owners, which means you cannot guarantee they would all be fed on forage or bedded on bedding materials that have not been treated with a herbicide. If those animals eat any hay or haylage or are bedded on straw that the field had been sprayed with herbicides, residue of those herbicides will still be in that compost. So then when you plant your beautiful seedlings in it, you will find that the herbicides will affect their growth, and quite likely that they will die. So if you're picking up your bags of composted manure from the stables, you do have to heed that warning. If it's somebody you can perhaps ask them, do they know their horses have been fed on organic hay that hasn't been sprayed or bedded? Sometimes this is where cow manures can be quite handy, because the farmer generally owns all the cows and he can tell you yes or no, have they eaten or been bedded on anything with herbicides in it. Another disadvantage to the manure from stabled horses is that you do have to wait for it to compost, because of the urine, it can be quite high in ammonia until it's had a chance to rot down. But if you know it's not got any herbicides in it, and you've given it time to rot down, it is a fantastic growing medium, but you just have to be a little bit cautious about those things. So when I started growing, I was reading all that information about manure, but quickly realised it didn't apply to me. My horses are not stabled. Okay, so this is a pile of poo, and it is just poo. There is no bedding in here, no hay in here, anything like that. So I was reading information that wasn't really that relevant or helpful to me, because I do not need to wait for this to compost. If I plant straight into this, there will be no harm. It is better if it is composted, but it won't easily compost to high temperatures, so it will likely have a lot of weed seeds in it. And the reason it won't compost the high temperatures is because it doesn't have the cardboard, leaves, hay, bedding. So you could get it to compost hot if you added those things, but actually I really love the slow compost process I have here, because I rely on vermiculture, which we'll have a look and see what I mean. Okay, so these worms are red wrigglers. I haven't gone out and bought these worms. This dung heap has been here on and off for about 6 years. I do occasionally get it all removed because there's more than I can possibly use. What I mean by there's more than I could possibly use is that I get one full wheelbarrow from my horse paddock every day. So that's 360 full wheelbarrows of horse poo per year. So this pile was completely cleared about 12 months ago. So you get an idea that I'm not short of horse poo, which is why it's one of my go-to manures. I have actually experimented with growing the same seedlings, started at the same time, in either fresh poo straight off the field or poo that's been composted slightly by vermiculture. And I've got to say, the only real difference I found was that the water retention was better in the vermiculture compost, where it had been broken down more. Sometimes the fresh poo can be a bit nuggety, and when it's dry, unless you've really raked that through, they're just like hard bricks. So I always try and use it when it has been slightly composted, unless I'm going to cover it. This is going to be on the bed all winter now, so by the time I come to planting it, the fresh poo I took off the field today will be pretty much composted. And the other benefit to taking the poo fresh out of the field in the winter is that the horses would have consumed way less weed seeds. When they are grazing in the summer and eating out the hedges in the summer, you'll find that they're eating way more sting nettle seeds, way more dock seeds, and that will all end up in your flower beds. Whereas over the winter, they're eating grasses with no seed heads on, so it's pretty safe. Unless, of course, you are feeding hay, which I only tend to feed hay when we have hard frost. So they did have some hay about a week ago for a week, but they're back just on grazing again now. Anyway, we'll go back in the garden now. I've caught my breath from pushing those wheelbarrows across the road, and start mulching the bed. Okay, so I've cut back nearly everything now. I'm just going to have to go and get some larger snips for the helichrysum right at the back there, because it's got some really big chunky stems on it. And also you can see there's a few weeds in here that I don't really want to mulch over. So what I'll do, I'll just go through and just take out the worst of the weeds. I'm not going to take out everything because it was going to have a really thick, heavy layer of mulch on it, so that will suppress them quite a lot. And the whole idea of this is to make it pretty quick and efficient, but I will just go through with my hory knife and take out the worst. not really done an introduction of myself or my garden yet. I'm going to film that. It may well be that I do put that on YouTube before this one, but in case I don't, I'm on clay. And when we've had a bit of rain like we have now, I mean, you could almost make sculptures from it. It's really stodgy stuff, and that's why it's so important that I regularly mulch. Sometimes I mulch twice a year, sometimes once a year. This is one of my wetter beds, and that's why this one doesn't get planted up with green manures, and I only use this for half hardy annuals, so I don't put any bulbs in here. If I put anything in here over the winter, it'd be really likely to rot. So this one will actually be covered once I've mulched it. It will be permeable, so moisture will be able to get in, but it just stops the weeds coming back. But we'll do that in a minute. Okay, so I'll just turn you around and show you what the bed looks like before I mulch it, because you will see there's still quite a lot of plant material there. But by leaving the roots and that plant material in situ underneath the mulch, it will actually feed the soil, and there are lots of really beneficial bacteria and fungi around those roots, which will still be there untouched in the soil when I replant again half hardy annuals May time. Okay, so here, this is just the remains of some scabious, and I've pulled quite a lot of nettle out of here. This is the remains of amaranthus. This is not really any remains here. I think this was Greek cress, but it probably is just rotted away to nothing. There's a rogue feverfew seedling there. I will just leave that, because in the spring, if it's still survived under the mulch, I can replant it. And this was the statice, really slimy from the frosts we just had. And then this was the helichrysum, which had the really tough stalks. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and give this a really thick layer of mulch. Okay, so here you've got a wheelbarrow full of the fresh manure at the back there that I took from the paddock today, and then in front a wheelbarrow through of the composted manure that could have been taken some months ago. I'm going to use both of these as mulch on the bed that I've just shown you. I don't think I've really made it clear that this fresh poo is from my own horses, so I know their paddocks haven't been treated with herbicides. Also, they very, very rarely eat any hay, but when they do, it is organic hay, and I do know the source. It's much preferable for me to use the fresh poo and have a few weed seeds than to have a manure that I'm not sure if it's got herbicides in it or not. Just look at all my wormy friends. Okay, so that's all the mulch down the bed. I'm running out of time a bit now. The light's going, and I need to do the animals before it gets dark, and I need to get ready to go out for Christmas Eve drinks. But what I think I'm just going to do before I cover this bed is just get a few leaves. Okay, so the reason I decided to add the leaves was because I felt a bit guilty about taking all of those little worms out of their compost heap. So adding the leaves means all of my little wormy friends in there will have some food and something to keep them busy when I cover them up for the winter. I've just come in the shed because my neighbour's just started hedge trimming and it's quite loud out there. and also it's getting a bit windier. Just a word on the weed membrane you've just seen me cover my bed with. I'm not an advocate for weed membrane. When I first started growing cut flowers, I started following lots of YouTube channels which were really large flower farms in America, where they use the weed fabric to grow through as well. So being really keen and really excited, I did buy weed membrane with the intention of growing through it as they did in America. And in fact, for my first year I did, and I absolutely hated growing through the weed membrane. But it does mean that I've got it for covering beds, for which it is very useful because it does let the water through, but it does suppress the weeds. But obviously I'm trying to grow in a way that's good for the environment, and it is a lot of plastic. So I wanted to explain that I am reusing it and recycling it, so it's not going to go to landfill until it's completely tatty and not usable. And you'll notice I'm also using it from a path, and that is really more of a space and finance issue. I have a really small patch and I'm on clay, so my paths get really muddy, and I needed a cheap, cost-effective way of being able to walk down the path, and I'm afraid that the weed membrane plastic won out. If money were no object and space were no object, I wouldn't do it. I would have a more environmentally friendly method of paths. Okay, so I've tried to dig myself out of that hole anyway.